My name is Johan Kördel. For those of you who don't already know me, I am the CEO of BioStock, and happy to lead a fantastic team who has put together this premiere of the BioStock Global Forum together. I couldn't be more proud, that's what I can say. We are looking forward to 2 very intense days with lots of presentations. We have panel discussions and keynote speakers. And I'm personally looking forward to learning a lot. And that is basically the point of this event, to connect people and to share insights and hopefully learn a lot. And to facilitate the connections and the personal interactions, we actually wanted to keep the size of this event a little bit smaller. Some of you have probably been to our summit event in the fall, which is a little bit bigger in scale. This room usually is jam-packed, the people standing in the back. That's not the case today, but that's not misfortune, it's actually planned this way. So hopefully you will feel that you have enough space and also a good overview of the room so that you can connect and meet new people. So I'm not going to stand here for long talking. Extremely happy to see you here. I know that there will be more people joining us during the day. If you have any questions, any practical questions, feel free to reach out to the BioStock team members. We will always find someone in the reception, of course, but we are also around circling. So just grab us if you need anything. I want to present today's moderators. I'm standing here with Sonja Schwarzenberger, and she will be moderating panel discussions, and also Michael Jewett, who will both be your cicerone for the day, guiding you through the program, and also, moderate the Q&A sessions with companies who are presenting and so on. So without further ado, I would like to say welcome again and leave the word and the stage to Michael. Take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Jonas. Well, before we get things kicked off, I want to start with some of the boring stuff. So I'd like to make you all aware of the emergency exits, which are marked by the green signs over here and over there. And if you need to use the bathroom, it's you exit over here and you go down the hall. And of course, we have our mingle area right out here for all the breaks and the lunch, which you're all welcome to during the breaks. As Jonas mentioned, we have a lot of company presentations, some very exciting early and growth stage companies presenting today. And at the end of each presentation, there will be time for a short Q&A session where you, the audience, will get a chance to ask your questions. And for that purpose, there's actually a QR code on the program that you can scan, and that'll give you access to the Slido program, which is the program where you can punch in your questions, and then those questions will be referred to us, and we can ask them after the presentations. But we also have some expert insights and panel discussions, some very exciting panel discussions during the event, where we'll focus on navigating new markets, finding the right partners, and also some cross-border deal making. And with that in mind, I'd like to start the event with our first expert insights session, how to make Nordic life science companies attractive internationally, a venture investor's perspective. And our expert for this session is Johan Kördel, managing partner at Sound BioVentures. Welcome, Johan. The floor is yours.
I should start off with thanking Jonas and the organizers for inviting me. I also want to thank them for calling me an expert. And finally, I'd like to thank them for letting me go first. So I've taken upon myself, without talking to BioStock, to hopefully stimulate some discussion during these 2 days based on what I say or what I don't say. So I come from Sound BioVentures, a venture investor based in Malmö. I myself, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a product of Lund. That's one of the reasons why I'm here, and one of the reasons why Sound BioVentures is based in Malmö, not in Stockholm. Very important, I think. So this is the team, Sound BioVentures, and apart from myself, all the way to the left, you see Casper sitting down, and in the back, in the middle, Bibash standing up. Those are the 3 founding partners of Sound BioVentures. But we have more investors in our investment team, and Philip, who sits all the way to the right, will be here during these days, and you can have a chance to talk to him. In particular, he's sitting right there, waving. In particular, when we come to something that we're doing experiments with that Philip have been spearheading. So we are a 116 million euro venture fund that specializes in investing in clinical stage therapeutics companies that are private. Already there, I've lost most of you guys, right? But that's what we do, and that's the perspective that I come from when I tell you what's wrong with all of us. But at the same time, I think there are so many fantastic things with this industry, and that's why I'm here in biotech and today at BioStock. So in terms of what we look for within that very narrow niche, we are relatively agnostic when it comes to which therapeutic area and which modality that we are considering investing in. But at the same time, we're full of pet peeves and pet likes, and with 6 people in the investment team, you can imagine that it becomes a very fine sieve that you have to pass through in order to be able to be considered by us. And what are those properties that leads to an investment is really the theme for how can we as Nordic biotech executives improve the possibilities for us to reach out in the world, be it to find finance or to sell our companies or to sell our products. So this is the portfolio that we built over the 2.5 years that we have been investing. And you can see that we've covered geographically quite well. We set out to do a third of our capital in Scandinavia, a third in the rest of Europe, and a third in the US. We are this week closing the 8th investment, which will be an American investment. I don't know when it will be announced because there are others involved, but soon. But something that's glaring here is that we have not invested in Sweden. That's not for lack of trying. Remember, private is an issue here because in Sweden, the public markets have been open for you guys to raise money, and you can discuss among yourselves if you haven't already formed an opinion about was this good or not, considering that 3 of our biotech companies have bankrupted or liquidated during this year, and we're not done yet because of the public markets being so suppressed, right? But for us as investors in private companies, that's unfortunately taking away half of the opportunities of clinical development stage companies, which is something that we have to mitigate. And one of the mitigations we've done is that we've hired an entrepreneur in residence, Fredrik Lehmann, that is standing up all the way to the right. Fredrik works half-time for us, and his job is to actually start companies based on, for instance, something that gets left over on the shelves in your companies, or that comes out of somebody that bankrupts. But he's also talking to companies that exist around universities in the US, in Asia, as well as large pharma companies that have portfolios that are being culled because they're now starting to fire scientists because they need to make more profit. So this is the 4-leaved clover that we look for when we look for an investment. And as we all know, a 4-leaved clover is a rather rare thing. And all of these areas are areas where we as Nordic biotech companies could be better. The team doesn't have to be a full team, but anyone who has had to recruit management knows that it takes a lot of effort and gambles if you don't know the people, if you can't just call somebody in your stable. So there has to be a nucleus of competent people that ideally have done what it is that you're financing them to do before. And given the fact that CEOs, more than half of all CEOs in biotechs are first-time CEOs, it's of course a challenge to take a bet on somebody. It also has to be compatible with the venture model, something that we'll come back to. But venture investors are usually not investors that invest in a company, then follow the company all the way into the commercialization phase. A venture investor usually backs the creation of data that shows that the innovation is worthwhile. And that is, in our case, a time horizon that we hope would be 4 to 5 years. So it means that whatever you're doing, which is all worthwhile, also has to match us as an investor. Now think about how can we as Nordic companies become better. You have to understand your customer, and we will talk about that a little bit. Then, is it the money round, and is it compatible with us as an investor with 116 million euros? We're not a large investor. We typically invest 6 million euros the first time, and then we have the same amount of money in reserves. But we don't want to invest less than that, because the amount of work we do, being active investors that always take a board seat and work actively with the companies, bringing our expertise, our network, and our connections apart from our money. And that's why some people call venture smart money, as opposed to the public market, where you get families and friends and people who don't understand biotech investing in your company. That isn't smart money. So we want to have a board seat. You typically can be guaranteed that if you have 10% of the company, although that's not written somewhere, you can negotiate other things, but that's something to think about. So that puts restrictions to the valuation and the size of the round that we can participate in. And we can talk more offline about that. And then maybe the most important thing, which is, of course, to solve an unmet medical need. Now, for us, this is a main area where we're thinking about how we as Nordic companies can break through the white noise, or as in this case, the tarmac. And this is why I'm in this business, because of the patients. And if this is not the reason why you're in this business, I think you should think again if you should be in this business. But this is why we're here, right? So, what type of unmet medical needs should we help this patient with if we have limited resources? Which we do, which is evident by the companies that go bankrupt right now. So, the unmet medical need, of course, could be to make it easier for the doctor, to make it easier for the healthcare system or payer to help the patient. But we usually try to start with the patients because we're focused on therapeutics. And if we understand the product in relation to the patient, we can then go on and understand it in relation to the other categories of customers that you have to think about. So let me tell you a story about something that isn't compatible with the venture model, and from the perspective of being a venture investor, was not a good idea, although it was a very good idea from the perspective of the patients. So this is an investment that I did together with Casper Brehm, one of the co-founders of Sound, and Mette Christine Ager, who was the managing partner for Lindberg Ventures. This goes back to the birth of Lindberg Ventures in 2010. So Lifecycle Pharma was a Danish company that was spun out of Lundbeck that had a technology to formulate drugs in a better way. And Lundbeck didn't want to carry the investment, so they pushed it into the foundation, and the foundation didn't have the competence, so they pushed it into the venture team that was just forming in 2010. So they had this technology, and they were told, you better show what it's useful for, and they made a formulation of tacrolimus, which is an immunosuppressant that you take when you have organs transplanted into you to suppress your immune system so that it doesn't as easily reject your organ. And they started out doing this in kidney. They had very good phase 2 data, in particular in a special genetic background, because as it turns out, people that have African genetic background, they have a different set of cytochrome P450s that became important in play with the metabolism of this drug. And if you have that variation, you get severe tremor, and you actually can be restricted from what you can do in your daily life because of that. So a clear improvement for the patients. No pharma was interested in taking over. So the company then reloaded with significant amounts of money from Lindberg Foundation and from the Novo Holdings organization. And they generated phase 3 data that were equally good. And no one was interested in taking over the responsibility for marketing the drug. So what did the investors do? Well, they recruited an American CEO that in the US started building a commercial infrastructure. And his name was Craig Collard. The company changed name to Veloxis, although it was still traded on the Copenhagen Stock Exchange. And when Craig had gotten to a top line that was $100 million turnover over 12 months, Asahi Kasei said, wait a minute, that's an interesting cash flow that we would like to have. This was a fantastic investment for the financial investors. I can only speak to the portion that the Lundbeck Fund and Venture team owned, but that was a 6 times return on a very large investment. The problem with this is that it took 14 years. And you have to look for the investors that are going to live with you for 14 years. And this company was public halfway through, right? That will have the stamina to back you that long if that's what it takes to make a product. So it's not compatible with the venture model because we have at maximum 10 years. And as I said, we look for 4 to 5 years. Why am I happy to bring this up today, although the slides were done before the business was announced? Asahi Kasei placed a bid on the Swedish biotech company Calliditas for $1.1 billion yesterday. That's an 80% premium to the share price. And it's going to be very good for the Swedish investors to get that money back and put it to use in companies like yours. So you have to think about who your customer is. And if what you want to do is build a company that sells drugs, you need to find the right investors. And it's probably not most venture funds. So one of the things that this discussion about what the unmet medical need leads to is something you should go and talk to Philip about, because Philip has developed this framework for us to think about the impact we have. Not only if we think it's a good idea and if we can make money, but if this has impact. And the impact comes in 2 different flavors. And think risk-adjusted NPV. You can in the same way think about risk-adjusting the change to the quality of life you can give a patient. And as it turns out, for instance, in the investment we've done in the Spanish company Artex that has an mRNA treatment for muscle dystrophy. And if it works, it's going to give those patients 30 more years of life. So you can actually calculate that. Is this very useful? That we're thinking about this investment. We're not there yet that we'll let this drive our decisions, but I've had this reflection over the last couple of days because on my table right now, I have the opportunity to invest in nail fungus treatment, and I have the opportunity to invest in a rare disease treatment that would make those patients have a normal life. And the business cases are similar. But it would feel better from an impact perspective to make the decision to go with a rare disease treatment. And this is something that is growing in the biotech investment world. You might know that EU regulation demands that all financial actors, be it private equity or be it venture funds, have to report on sustainability measures. And once you start reporting, you will start to be driven to change the sustainability measures, be it carbon emissions or the impact you have on people's quality of life and longevity. So your customers, back to the patient, most important, you have the public, you have people like us, and this happens to be a group of people that work together in the Knowledge project, which is an attempt to standardize the ESG reporting that companies like you have to do if you have people like this as an investor, so that you only have to do it once rather than to each of the different investors you have. It's growing, and we hope that within a year or 2, all significant actors will be part of this. I already told you that the venture capital model is not necessarily to stick with you all the way to the exits, well, to a exit, but all the way to the end of treating people and changing how medicine is done. This is the cynical version. I only wanted to show for you that we are looking for that event that will increase the probability of you having a good innovation and therefore the value of what you're doing, and that's usually what we back. And this, of course, is pharma, which is a very important player for us, and you know that half of pharma's marketed drugs now are coming from people like you, where their fantastic machinery to do full development, manufacturing, and commercialization comes into play. So this graph is very useful to think about where all these actors are. So it's a little complicated. So coming down from the left is the probability of reaching the stage of the development of a drug, and we start at target to hit and end up with commercial. And as you can see, our business is hard, right? And then the darker blue curve is the NPV value of what it is that we are doing and how that grows with the stages. And in the lighter blue is the actual investment that's needed. So the reason why biotech venture investors try to be here is, of course, that for the investment, that's where you get the biggest buck, right? That's where you get that hockey stick. But you have to think about who your customer are, because of course there are venture investors that will back you early, and there are venture investors that will help you grow and even commercialize, and maybe we're talking about private equity at that point, right? So you have to understand what the investors that you might be talking to are interested in. But you also have to understand if you're talking to pharma, I mean, as we talked about when it comes to life cycle pharma / Veloxis, no problem picking up the cash flow, right? But if you have, and let's talk about one of the elephants in the room. If you have a women's health innovation, no pharma is going to touch that apart from two. And they don't have a lot of money because they're small, so they will only make a deal every whatever, second, third year. So if you have an early innovation in women's health, there's no offset for that unless you go public and you raise the money from the general public. On the other hand, if you have a phase 3 data set for a women's health product, all pharmas will say, okay, that's interesting, we'll take it. So where you go and innovate, where we in the Nordic countries that have limited resources go and innovate, we have to think about where it's going to end up. And not just say that I have this great finding and what should I do with it, because it might not help you. The valley of death. You've seen this before, the innovation curve. We start off with enthusiasm, then people lose heart, and then you go through the valley of death, the trough of disillusionment. And then somebody sorts out the problems that led you to lose your interest in what was going on, and you build. And you build an interesting business that will help people and will make money. This is the point I'd like to introduce Wayne Gretzky, the greatest ice hockey player ever. He played for Edmonton Oilers most of his career, and that's when he said this. Why are you so good, Wayne? Well, I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck is going to be. So here we have Wayne with the Edmonton Oilers jersey on, and he's looking for when it's time to invest. And from my perspective, which could be very different from yours, you don't just invest where the puck is if the puck is in the hype phase. You invest when it's time for the area to mature. As an example, this is why I asked you, Mika. You don't invest in AI and drug discovery now. It's going to do our work for us. But now is not the time, because it's still not useful. And if you invest, you only invest so that public investors take it over from you and they lose their money. Eventually, it's going to run me and all of us. Gene editing to treat diseases, it was at that stage, and several large European venture investors made a lot of money by hyping something, putting on the public stock exchange, and everyone wanted to be in gene editing, and they exited. And everyone is sitting with this in their lap. it's now starting to be useful. We are seeing drugs that actually come out on the market that is using gene editing. Maybe this is getting to the point where you should think about investing. Do not go after incretins, okay? Invest in the companies that have them already. Don't go after them because we don't need 9 marketed checkpoint inhibitors and 45 in phase 3 clinical trials. That's not where our money should go. The money we have should go to the best of you guys, not to be the 10th drug on the market. And the GLP-1s, yes, they're going to sell for $50 to $75 million according to something that, sorry, $1 billion, according to something that came out today. Don't go there. But obesity is becoming a mature area. Why don't you go after targets that will reduce the loss of muscle mass that you see with the incretins, or targets that don't only reduce appetite but actually increase energy expenditure without causing any other havoc in your system? We're getting there. And here, the companies that have the GLP-1s and the GIPs, or the dual drugs, they will buy you when you're preclinical, as we've seen Novo Nordisk do over the last year. We, of course, as an investor, we try to be here. It's not always the case, but that's our dogma, right? Now, I told you I'm in this business, and you should be because of the patient, but of course, somebody's paying me to be in this business, and if money wasn't important, it wouldn't be possible. Have you ever looked at the back of a dollar bill? Yeah, think about that when you think about the election. In God we trust, but we know everyone else needs to bring data. And here I think we have much to do in the Nordics to think about what type of data can we afford to generate, because this is the problem. Since everyone is investing in checkpoint inhibitors, they should be and will be investing in GLP-1s. They should be investing in us being able to generate better data in our Nordic companies so that we can convince other people that this is such a good idea as we already know, right? And then we come to what I think singles us out here in the Nordics, our lack of storytelling. I think you know what I mean, but let me give you an example. I had a Nordic CEO say to me the other week, we screwed up. We're 9 months delayed. If you give us $5 million, we can catch up. And we'll save the 9 months of delay we will have otherwise. If this had been an American CEO, he had said, I have a great opportunity for you. If you invest $5 million in us, I can accelerate my program with 9 months. It's the same information. Was it important that they screwed up? Yes, you'll find it in due diligence. You'll make an assessment of, is this actually making me less interested in investing in this company? After all, I can accelerate the program if I put 5 million in there. True story, right? So we are scientists, many of us that come into this industry, and many of you in the room. And it's very important that we're always truthful, right? And that's also the case in the business of science. But you can think about how you tell the story. And that's something that we're not very good at, because we have this, the Jantelagen. And if you're not familiar with it, it basically says that you're worth nothing, and whatever you do, I'm not interested because I'm equally important as you, but I'm not very important either. Now, the Anglo-Saxon world, which is our main competitor, I think, when it comes to storytelling, they have this. I mean, they start with show and tell in kindergarten. But this is a debate club, and looking at the uniforms, it's probably in the UK. And if you can read what it says, they're going to debate if more money should be put into space agencies. How old are they? Maybe 11, 12? Isn't that fantastic? I wish I had that. No. Instead, fear of standing up in front of people, having to give a speech. You probably remember Annika Sörenstam, who actually on purpose did not win in the beginning because she did not want to stand up and give the thank you acceptance speech of having won the golf tournaments that she started competing in. So here's something that we as a society have to do something else if we are going to be more successful. Because yes, everyone will do due diligence on you and they will find all the truths. But in order to get them to invest that, you need to be able to sell your story in a correct but also inviting way. So 2 more slides. The customer is always right. Don't argue with the customer. You will gain nothing by that. But you can always walk away and ignore the customer. But I hate CEOs that when I say, my opinion is that this is not for us because of this or this or this. And then they start arguing with me about that. And I just said, well, it's my opinion. You can't argue with my opinion. And I think you should meet the world confident that you have a great thing. And if people starting tjafsa with you, then just ignore them. And then, because I want to stimulate discussions, I am of the opinion that one of the main reasons why the Swedish biotech companies are not as successful as they could be, it's because of the teacher's exemption. And those of you that are professors and entrepreneurs in the room, you are exempted, but everyone else is sitting on their science because they don't know what to do with it. And if they had more professional tech transfer offices that would be more professional, if they got more of the profits and they could invest in being professional, they would help you and they would make this science reach the patient, which is why we started talking about this in the first place. And then, of course, you can always work harder. Okay, my time is almost out. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Johan, for that wonderful presentation. And you are definitely an expert and also a very good storyteller. So you must have some Anglo-Saxon background there in you. But with that, we have to run along here, and we have to jump to our first panel of the day. And for that, I will leave the floor to our CEO, Jonas.
So, gentlemen, please have a seat. Thank you. And I will have a seat here. Oh, it's very low, these chairs, but it's comfy anyways. So, this panel discussion is going to be on the topic of deal making in a global context. That sounds like a very broad topic. So, but in essence, we want to talk about a little bit more about what Johan was touching on in his presentation here, what the Nordic growth stage biotech or pharma or medtech companies need to consider and to prepare for when expanding internationally in order to successfully form partnerships, strike deals, of course, and possibly attract investors as well outside of the Nordics. And with me to discuss these things, important things, I have a distinguished panel of 3 people here with me from, well, slightly different angles coming into this discussion. Over here we have Hans Jeppsson, CFO from Vicore Pharma. Welcome, Hans.
Thanks.
In the middle we have Jens Lindberg, CEO of Medivir. Welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for calling me distinguished.
And then to my left we have a figure I think most of you who are based in Lund are very familiar with, called Borrebaeck, professor and serial entrepreneur. I want to tap into your vast knowledge and experiences when it comes to driving companies forward and taking them out in the world, because that's what you have done and are trying to do. And I would like to start with you, Carl, if it's okay. You have the mic there. You are a professor. Do you agree with Johan's assessment about the teacher's exemption?
I mean, I think it was a great speech by Johan, but obviously it was quite wrong with the conclusion, because I spun out 5 companies from my research, which is mostly cancer immunology. And I could have done that without the teacher's exemption. We can go into a lot of discussion with this, but I think times are changing, so the universities are getting better and better. But when we spun out the first company, the university didn't know what commercialization was. So, hooray for teachers' exemption.
It was a little bit of an open goal there, having you on the panel.
I know.
So, when you've come as far as coming out of academia, you have an idea. Jens, with Medivir, you can of course please start out by just saying in the shortest elevator pitch you ever held, what the audience, what you do, what focus area you're in, and then it would be really interesting to hear what the sort of the biggest challenge you have faced to get to where you are with Medivir today, and how you have overcome that.
Ooh, that could be a very long story. The short version on the first one, on the back of the obesity pandemic, liver cancer will become an epidemic. And we're trying to sort of change the way liver cancer is treated, i.e. trying to treat the cancer in the liver, and we're the only ones trying to achieve that. I mean, and I won't do the long version on Medivir, we have the approach we are taking is that in the number of assets we have, we made a decision that we are going to drive development of one of those assets ourselves, and then the other ones we are trying to find a partner for, and we have successfully found partners for most of them, where a few of them are still in-house. And so those are the kind of 2 approaches we're taking. With the lead asset, we will also be going down the partnering route at a certain point of time, because as a small company, we don't think that it's the right way to bring it all the way to the market. So we will be looking for partners in that respect as well. The partner might look a bit different in terms of what we're looking for, but that's our approach.
And speaking of challenges, then having, like you said, you have formed partnerships already, and you have a clear strategy of when you will try to form a partnership with your lead asset. But having gotten this far, in your time as CEO of the company, what would you say have been your toughest challenge?
But then I'll go back to what Johan said, in sort of in terms of the trough and the timeline, etc. I think that the timing of when you explore that partnership, when you reach out, is it's a challenging element, because what might be a good timing for me might not be a good timing for a potential partner, and you only get one chance to make a first impression. So in terms of when do we go, because I don't want to go too early. Data might not be good enough, might be too early. You don't want to go too late, because then you lose momentum in terms of moving towards markets. I think that when is the perfect time to do it, both from my end and also in terms of what I think that potential partner will be looking for. So timing.
Sounds like when my youngest son is giving me driving direction. Is that not now, not now, now? That's when you turn. So Hans, you fairly recently with Vicore Pharma did strike a deal with a Japanese company. Timing is of the essence, obviously. Can you walk us through the timeline of that deal in brief, if you will?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we were fortunate to be able to strike a deal in earlier this year with a Japanese company, NS Pharma, Nippon Shinyaku, and we are in the field of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. They are experts in PAH, which is nearly closely related indication. I think they founded Uptravi, a big selling drug in that field. So it took some time to find that optimal partner, which we think is a very good partner for us. And it takes time. I think that's one learning lesson. If the board pushes you to strike a deal quickly, you have to push back. It really takes time. I think we started out those discussions over a year ago before striking the deal. Some, I think, interesting components of that deal is that we brought in a new CEO, or the board decided to bring in a new CEO in September last year. Ahmed Moussa, formerly at Peris in the US, is Boston-based, and he has a very strong deal-making background, $1 billion of total deal value. So he, of course, contributed a lot into those finalization of those discussions in the deal. I think also which is public from the press release, he brought in one advisor, Steve Engen, which is kind of his, when we had those discussions in JP Morgan earlier this year, very late stage, we understood that he's a big name there because they called him son, Steve Engen, but didn't call the other in the room Steve Engen, and he knows, of course, fluent Japanese, speaks fluent, and was, of course, instrumental in closing that deal. So that was very, very important.
Mm-hmm. So having someone by your side guiding you through the negotiations, so on, could be a key as well, of course. Carl, I was going to ask you, having, like you said, spun out or formed several companies, you have within different fields as well, both medtech and biotech, and also now digital health. I mean, I'm fairly sure that there are different challenges, but depending on which field you're in, so to speak. But in your most current endeavors with Pain Drainer, could you give us a brief sort of encapsulation of where you are right now and what has been toughest in bringing you to that point?
Yes, I mean, my experience goes way back. So we started with pharma, then diagnostics, and now digital therapeutics. And I mean, there's so many differences and different ways to market, different way to do the deal, and different amount of money you need for the deal. I mean, the main challenge for digital therapeutics is that Sweden is totally immature regarding digital implementations, and even though the wording is different when you hear it. So what we've done is over just a few years develop a product which in pharma obviously, as you know, takes 10-15 years, and in diagnostics maybe 6-7 years. So the speed has been tremendously much faster. The amount of money we need is much less. The challenge is the commercialization because of, again, the immaturity of sort of how should we implement digital therapeutics. So what we've done is we've gone to the US and used my network and tried to find what we call islands of acceptance on the East Coast, a couple of big health organizations. Digital therapeutics is a volume sale. We need maybe a couple of thousand out of the 5 million patients there are to reach break even. So, and also if we can get one of the big ones, you know, there are Cleveland Clinic, there are Brigham, and there are a number of these big ones, then we can see that we also can get the next one. It's like investors. The first one is tough, the second one is a little bit easier, the third one comes automatically. It's the same introduce, and you can actually do this pretty much by yourself. Of course, if you can have someone who is, you know, very familiar with the US market and so on, it helps. And there are ways of getting that, but it's completely different to the diagnostics and pharma. So it's more of a scaling now. We try to scale Pain Drainer. Yeah. And have you formed any specific partnerships then in order to open doors for you in the US, or did you solely rely on your personal network
in that sense?
Well, initially it's been personal networks, but then it's like, what do you call it, ringar på vattnet, wakes on the water, whatever. And we have some really high-level key opinion leaders, which are physicians, and they help us a lot by introducing us to the next and to the next and to the next. So from that point of view, we have, from a scientific point of view, or whatever you want to call digital therapeutics, a very strong support. But then you walk right into the, let's say, Presbyterian Hospital, you walk right into the bureaucracy and the administration, and that's pretty much the same for all and that takes time. It's not impossible at all, but it takes time. And investors, which we mostly use family offices in the beginning, always want us to do quicker, obviously, but it takes time. But it's going in the right direction, absolutely.
That's great. So Jens, have you had any experience in strategic partnerships? When you look at China, for example, as a specific market which you are interested in, I'm pretty sure.
I was going to say, don't say China, because that is not an area we're focusing on at the moment, but that's okay.
Okay, my bad. But what type of partnerships have been crucial in your international growth strategy?
I mean, at the moment there are two types of partnerships that we've looked for, and up until this point, it's been focused on finding homes for the assets that we are not sort of focused on ourselves, that we're not driving. Whereas at the moment, now we're looking more sort of for what Hans and Vicore has done with regards to finding a partner to co-develop and commercialize. So we've been in that. And though there we look for different partners. Sort of in the latter part, I'm looking for maybe a bigger name for the validation, for the expertise, for local regulatory capabilities, so on and so forth. Whereas on what we've done so far, the company I'm looking for is slightly different. Then it's more important that this asset sort of, it fits well with sort of clearly their priorities. It becomes an important asset for them that sort of maybe their top priority, so they spend time on it, etc. So, because I will kind of leave it be. So I will be looking for a different type of companies. And then clearly from a geographic point of view, it depends on the disease area where I focus.
So having that strategic mindset, does that sort of exclude the biggest companies? Are you more looking into specialist partners?
I would never say exclude, but sort of on the first topic, yes, I would sort of more focus on maybe smaller companies, sort of clearly well-resourced, hopefully, but sort of where this becomes something that is important for them, critical, not something that they can sort of, we focus on our other things. If there is a sort of a kind of a finance crunch, because we see that with some of the bigger biotechs in the US as well. They might have a lot of money, but they still need to be a bit conservative. And if you're not top, then you get put on hold.
And so going out in the world and trying to, trying to connect, trying to open doors, trying to find partners, and hopefully also get into negotiations with partners. As Hans was telling, the cultural nuances or the cultural differences can be extremely important to keep track of and to know how they can impact your negotiations and so on. Can you share any examples of when cultural nuances has become a problem for you, or something that you were aware of that, I'm very, very Swedish in this context?
Not any sort of very clear specific. We try to adapt to some extent in terms of where we go. So if there is a US sort of US company or US counterpart, then we do try to, and now I'm looking at Johan again, to try to be a bit less Swedish maybe, be a bit more bullish, sort of a more taking a stronger approach. Whereas if we go to Japan, we know that sort of maybe we will adapt, sort of be slightly less bullish. We know that it takes longer time in Japan, so I can't push the process just as much. So we do try to adapt. But then I can't adapt too much because I am Swedish and we are Swedish, and there's a little bit of sometimes an expectation of, and we're going to work together going forward. So I kind of have to be somewhat transparent on who we are, how we operate, and what values we have, because otherwise the collaboration's not going to work going forward. So some adaptation.
You need to be true to yourself, basically.
Yeah, but Hans' point on the timing is an element that we've had to sort of remind ourselves of many times. Sort of like in certain parts of the world, it does take a bit of time, and don't push too much. Just kind of trust the process. It is moving along.
So, Carl, have you, having then leveraged your personal network in the US, for example, have you experienced, are there differences that you can say are, have been a hindering, or do you feel half American in that sense?
I think you have to adapt, but as Johan was saying, the customer is always right. So when I've experienced from China, Japan, South Korea, and US, and you sort of go into the different role. I mean, in Japan and China, it takes forever to do a deal. In South Korea, it's something in between, and in the US, it's actually quicker. But I don't think it's as long as you're aware of what they expect of you, I don't think it's a major problem. You have to be an amoeba, you just change.
Being an amoeba, that's concrete advice. We do have representatives from the US, from Japan, and from China that will be participating in the program, and hopefully we will learn even more than about how it actually works there. So international growth, it doesn't sound cheap, and I'm pretty sure it isn't cheap. So financing this growth must obviously be part of the headache, so to speak. And I know that Hans, with Vicore, you've had I wouldn't say luck. I would say that you have the fortune to have brought in some fairly big international investors. Would you like to tell us a little bit about how easy that was?
Yeah, we were very fortunate to bring in, we closed a financing transaction in June last year, so brought in OrbiMed and Surreta US investors. OrbiMed is probably it's a top tier, maybe top 3 in the world, so extremely fortunate to have them on board. We didn't convince them overnight, of course, so takes time. Slightly longer than it took to strike the deal with NS Pharma. So I think we met them first during the fall of 2018. So I met them quite a number of times over the years, many meetings, and finally we were able to get them on board. We're also, we are backed with peer to Johan's Sound and Philip's Sound BioVentures health cap. So we're very fortunate to have them on board. They came in Vicore 2018, so have been very active in the company. So if you are able to get those types of venture investors in the company, that's will make life easier. It's not easy as a biotech CFO, but that will make it easier because they are very active. They open up their network, professionalize the companies across a number of dimensions, and make introductions. And those interactions are very, very important. But very happy to have OrbiMed on board, and that is part of our trajectory going forward to starting. We brought in, as I mentioned, the US CEO. We have new US board members joining the company at the last month, or very recently. So going into a global phase 2B study now, including centers in the US. So we're really moving towards that direction, and part of that journey is to bring in US investors. And those are typical investors who do not invest like venture investors, one investment and that's it. So hopefully to be part of a future journey as well.
I do believe we have health cap in the room. So a little later we'll have an arm wrestling with Sound BioVentures and health cap out in the lobby. You can place your bets later. Having landed on these big US investors, you mentioned that you met them in 2018 the first time. How many times during the years of meetings and talks with them were you close to giving up on them?
Many times, I would say. I'm a long distance runner, but even I start to consider because if they turn down the opportunity to invest, but I think it's just a motivation to others here that never give up, meet as many as possible, and because you learn also for those that turn down the story, because you need to counter and meet those arguments, and you learn quite a lot. And not only investors, but many stakeholders out there. Could be KOLs, could be, many others. You really need to meet as many as possible. You really learn a lot. So I think, I was considering, is it worth to take this meeting? But it is. So don't turn down meetings.
Paid out in the end. Yeah. Jens, is this also your do you also perceive yourself as a long distance runner? I know you are somewhat of a what do you call it, cross-country skier with some certain skills, but what about your stamina in terms of financing?
Well, that's a good question. Remains to be seen. No, just to go with Hans here on this one, because I think that's a critical. It will take time, and you will need to meet and have that openness to learn in terms of, okay, what are they hearing, and what's good, what's not good, what are we not telling, or what are we telling and they are not perceiving in the right way, or what we believe to be in the right way. So I think that sort of meet and learn. And here also now actually we give Johan a lot of shout outs here today, but sort of I'll give him a really good one, and that is because I've had interactions with Johan on topics, and what is super appreciated, and that's not always the case, is if they're not interested, I want the feedback. I want to learn what was it that attracted you and not attracted you, so that we can then, if nothing else, go back home and generate evidence that will make them interested the next time around. There are way too many Johans in the world, if I'm going to be a bit controversial, that do not do that. That just sort of disappear. You get ghosted, sort of, even though you might have had a conversation or an introduction. So just that time, because then we can go back and do better, and then maybe there's an opportunity next time around.
I remember the first panel discussion I moderated with you, Carl. The first thing you said was, stay the hell away from venture capital. Do you still have that opinion, the public market being what it is right now?
It's a bit out of context, but I would say that initially, if you can survive with family and friends, it's better because they don't sort of interfere. We heard that venture capital is smart money. I would challenge that a lot, but after a while, you need so much cash that you need funding from venture cap, absolutely. But we try to do that as late as possible. Now, Pain Trainer is in scaling, for example. We need venture capital to go to the US market, but we've done quite well so far with family and offices. But I just want to comment on the requirement for companies getting funding from. It's so different because pharma is a expectation. You expect this to be a big success. And in the diagnostic, you have to show clinical validity, you have to show analytical validity, you have to show a plan for you have to come much further to get partners in the US, for example. And especially in digital, you basically have to have a product. And so it's very different what the venture capitalists require from the different companies in the different markets. And I think that's extremely important to realize, because it's super that you got these huge investment coming in from abroad, and that's because of the expectation, obviously, that the company will do extremely well. In diagnostic, you have to show that you're doing well. So yeah, it's a big difference.
And being then Swedish, coming from the Nordics, having formed various kinds of companies, when you speak to investors today, for example, US investors, and you have a digital product now, how are you perceived? How do you believe? Because they have a huge tech scene and health tech scene in the US. So, are you a small fish in a huge pond there?
Probably, but I mean, you have to believe in yourself. You don't go there. So we just have to show that we are better than the other ones, and we are in many cases. And I mean, and also in the US in particular, when you talk to the hospitals, their main interest is, as it should be, how do we make money, and then how can we publish this, and is it good for the patients? It's actually, and you would think it's different in Sweden, but it's not. It's the same. How can we get reimbursed for what we do? Can we publish, and is it good for the patients? So, and if you know the rule of the game, it's much easier. And again, if you don't believe in that you are better than the other ones, you stay home.
Okay. We have a keynote tomorrow titled "Go Big or Stay Home." So there's some truth in that, I'm sure. So. Have you ever been forced to adapt your business model or your way of thinking when you were going internationally and meeting with the counterparts there? And at what point did you realize that my approach just doesn't work here? Has that happened to you? Has it happened to you, Carl?
I mean, one example is in a diagnostic company we started. We went to CMS. We got a level of pricing, and then suddenly National Academy of Science came out with a policy paper 2022 about diverse representations. And since our test was only good for Caucasian, and going to the US with that one, immediately there was a stop in the reimbursement because 30% are Hispanics and blacks. We didn't know the market enough, and it was a big mistake. And so you have to go back and redo the test, and it took another year or two, and now it's going very well in the US. But that's a typical example of not knowing your market. And most, I mean, here in Europe, everybody's sort of, not really, but are Caucasians, and the samples we get from the hospitals are from Caucasians. So. Know your market, and in particular in the US.
Jens, have you been forced to adapt quickly or think on your feet, so to speak?
Not necessarily, no, but we try to take an approach where we explore alternative avenues from the get-go. So rather than this is the way we want to do it, then no, can there be different ways? So if there is a bandwidth to do it, then let's explore that. Which is sort of, for example, one of the reasons why we did meet with you one, because, well, this could be a different way of taking this asset forward, wouldn't maybe be our natural sort of way forward, but let's explore, because you never know in the end which way, which deal, which agreement will be the best.
And Hans, was that ever your experience? And for example, when talking to the investors that took forever to decide to invest in your company, did you at any point, you were mentioning you learn a lot from these meetings, and did you ever feel like, okay, we're going to have to rethink this quite a lot, or was it still just incremental changes?
I think it's a reiteration process. I mean, the storytelling, which Johan mentioned, I mean, you refine it all the time. I think in short, I think we haven't really adapted to, I mean, we have always had the focus on going to the US. Now we opened a subsidiary there as well, and the CEO and investors. I think so we have moved in that direction. Now we are a public company in the Nordics, so one of our key peers, Pliant, they have brought in $500 million. We have brought in $50 million, which is sizable in the Nordic context, but we are still competing on getting our drugs to the patients as quickly as possible. So of course that is, it's a tough challenge, because I think because of lack of resources relative to others, we have to cut corners, and we have to cut the right corners, so to say. In order not to come in a kind of lose momentum and time. I think maybe just one additional comment to the NS deal. One consideration that we did also when we went to Japan was to get the external validation, which you mentioned is important, and also not to sell the company without selling the company, to keep all options for the future for a European deal or a global deal where the Japanese rights will not be a poison pill, so not exclude a global deal in the future ex-Japan. So that was very important as part of our focus on the US or the growth in the US.
Yeah. And the title of this panel was Deal Making in a Global Context. So that's really to the point there, that to make sure that you, like you mentioned earlier when we were talking before this, that one deal is not a poison pill for the bigger markets or the global scene, so to speak. The timer is flashing red. I know that there was a slight altercation of the program because of one presenter falling ill. So I think we have a couple more minutes. Am I correct?
Yes.
Or am I just guessing? They're showing a lot of fingers up in the control room. So I think we have a few more minutes. So I mean, I think most people here are here to learn or to get their prejudice overturned or get their worst hopes confirmed. But if you were to share the sort of the most valuable advice you could give from where you are at, from your experiences, from your standpoints, respective standpoints with your companies right now, to someone who is sort of starting out, you know, maybe they have what they think is a great product, they have a good team, they have some money left at least in the bank to go forward, but they want to go out in the world now and try the wings, so to speak. What would be your best advice to them? If we can start with you, Hans.
Yeah, I think, I mean, from the CFO perspective, I think, I mean, capital structure and owners is, of course, one of the key focus areas for me. I think I mean, it takes a long time. Our lead drug was developed in 2004, and we're now entering phase 2B studies. We're covered by orphan drug and some other, but the composition of matter patent expires this year, so it takes time. I think of the end goal early, so you know how much capital will be needed. You need to go out and meet as many as possible, interact with multiple stakeholders, speak around with other companies, look at financial advisors. I mean, be critical there and speak with other companies when they raise capital of experience there, and meet as many as possible, because you learn so much from every meeting. But it of course takes a lot of time and effort. But I think be out there as much as possible is my key learning. And also, I think from a financing perspective, I mean, patient capital is so important. Think of getting those key investors invested, committed. They will support you. I mean, HealthCap has been with us since 2018, very committed to the company, supportive. And HBM Partners, a Swiss specialized investor, has been with us since 2017. And they of course have a great name in that network, and they will bring in others as well. So I think it's focus on getting those key investors on board, and that will make life easier.
2004, wow, you are indeed a long distance runner. So, Jens, what would your best advice?
Best is a strong word. I mean, the easy solution would be to say, I agree with everything Hans said.
Oh, it would be boring too.
No, I thought it was quite insightful. So,
yeah, but to copy his would be boring.
I want to pick on Hans here. No, if I take a slightly different angle, and this is going to sound a bit obvious to some extent, but I think from a kind of a partnering, deal making, if we go back to that topic, two elements. One, patience, sort of be patient if you can in finding your partner, because you only get to pick it once. So you want to find the right one. But then the other part, which I've seen a number of times, is that sort of when you spend time that sounds a bit obvious. Spend time on the agreement, make sure the agreement incentivizes both in the right direction, in the right way. I've seen agreements that sort of, looked quite good when signed, but sort of maybe doesn't incentivize sort of the other partner to kind of move with the right speed or move in the right direction or sort of do it, sort of prioritize the asset as much as they could. So try to spend a bit of time on ensuring that there is a proper win-win for both, because otherwise I was going to say, like, it's a bit like peeing in your pants. Sort of, if you might get a good deal up front, it's warm and fuzzy, but it gets cold and sticky quite quickly if they are not incentivized or it's not sort of fit with making sure that they spend the time, effort, and money on developing it fast enough.
That was about as far as from a boring answer you could go, I think. So be patient, look through the fine print, don't pee in your pants. Okay. Carl, you have vast experience. If you should distill it all into the one advice you want to give.
It's so easy to be a moderator, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Taking notes now.
We're taking. No, I think if you look at startup companies, my absolutely best advice is realize the entire journey. Think about the exit already now, because the company goes through so many different phases, and as a founder and an entrepreneur, you can do good in one or two of the phases. So, and when I say this to startups and say, oh, exit, that's far away, but your technology and your ideas are maybe 1/3 or 1/2 of the journey. Then you have all the other regulatory, commercialization, business plan, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And that's probably not your forte to do that as a founder. So consider the entire journey and think of, when will you leave the company? What is the exit of the company? Just as a discussion point, to realize that it's a long journey. And then obviously you have to, I agree with Johan's last slide, work harder. It's a tremendous much work, and you have to have passion. That's the only thing to survive, but consider the entire journey.
Thank you very much. That's really good advice, I think. And I must, I mean, and I also have to note that Johan was spot on when he said he was happy that he was first out, because I don't think anyone has ever gotten so many references in a panel discussion. But that's just great. We are actually running out of time soon. So, but I wanted to open up. Is there anything you would like to ask these distinguished gentlemen before I let them off stage? This is making my job as a moderator even easier. I let the audience ask questions. Yeah. Do we have any specific questions, or have they already answered all of your inquiries? I think it was so brilliant and so fulfilling that everyone already knows everything. Or they might be shy, and then they can catch you in the break after the next presentation and ask you anything they like then. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Extremely valuable and enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for leading that great discussion, Jonas, and thank you so much to all three panelists there. Before we jump to our first company presentation, I'd just like to remind everybody that if you want to submit any questions, you can scan the QR code on the program that you have in your hands. So without further ado, let's get to the first company presentation of the day. And our first company is Prolight Diagnostics. And here to present the company is CEO Ulf Bladin. Welcome, Ulf.
Thank you. Did you know that every 5 seconds someone in the US suffers from chest pains so severe that they seek care? If this is a heart attack, improvising a bit here now. So if this is a heart attack, obviously time to correct diagnosis and treatment is vital. So in the next couple of minutes, I will enlighten you a bit about Prolight's unique technology, which helps healthcare to rule in or rule out heart attacks early and save lives. At Prolight, we want to offer the foremost point-of-care systems on the market for quick, reliable diagnosis of acute events. And our launch product will be for the measurement of troponin to aid in the roll-in and roll-out of myocardial infarction. So why have we picked troponin, this biomarker? Well, during a heart attack, the troponin molecules are released into the bloodstream from the damaged heart muscle. And therefore, it is extremely important that you measure this biomarker, troponin, in addition to ECG, to be able to properly roll in and roll out a potential myocardial infarction. Today, we know that, for instance, in ambulances, they have ECG with them, but if you are to make a sensitive troponin analysis, that has to be sent in to the hospital laboratories. And that takes a long time to get that result back. So for the majority of cases with patients with chest pains, they are brought in to the emergency departments at hospitals. So in the US only, approximately 7 million patients present to the emergency department each year with chest pain. And that is at an estimated cost of $5 billion US. Out of those 7 million, it is less than 10% that are ultimately diagnosed with myocardial infarction. So everyone in this distinguished audience, you realize that here there are significant cost savings if a suspected myocardial infarction could be rolled out early in the care chain with the support then of point-of-care systems that can quickly and safely measure troponin at extremely low concentrations. At Prolight, we have now developed a unique digital technology with our point-of-care system. And when I say point-of-care system, it is this reader I hold in my right hand, and this is the cartridge. So the little cartridge is then prepared with the antibody that we are looking for, in this case, troponin. So I take a drop of blood on the cartridge and insert it into the instrument. And as I do this, if the blood now contains troponin, we will see that the biomarker then binds to the antibody, and by doing this, releases a photoactivated localized fluorescence bleaching, which results in a permanent black spot that you see there on the screen. And every spot corresponds to a molecular binding for the search biomarker, which in turn then is counted digitally by an optical camera lens that is inside the instrument. The test result then is showed on the screen where you get the concentration. So hereby we have developed an ultra-sensitive platform where biomarkers can be detected at extremely low concentrations. And already last year we were able to demonstrate proof of performance in serum as well as in whole blood for high sensitive troponin. And the performance, obviously, in terms of sensitivity and precision, is equivalent to the central laboratory. Throughout the entire development process, we have had a laser focus on COGS. And all through what I want to tell you here is, by this, I believe we have truly a superior performance compared to all competitors existing on the market, as well as those who will enter the market. I will also like to mention that when I say digital, it's that this is our proprietary technology where we are counting individual molecules. And this will be the very first time that you will have that technology on a point-of-care instrument. And also where we're able to show test results in as little as 10 minutes. So what is the market then looking for in terms of point-of-care instruments? Well, obviously you need to be able to detect, in this case, troponin at extremely low concentrations that are stipulated in the European and the US guidelines. Performance obviously has to be equal to central laboratories, and the response time should be within 10 minutes. The market also like to see that the point-of-care system should be portable and very easy to use, and be also with very small sample size, preferably a drop of blood. What the market also wants to see is if there is a possibility to test several biomarkers at the same time on the very same cartridge with the same amount of blood. That's what we call multiplex. And as everyone knows, it's extremely important to have a competitive price. Well, I'm happy to tell you with our now unique digital point-of-care system, we can actually today, I can tell you that we meet all these stringent requirements that are set by the market. So therefore, I will tick them off, each and every one in green here. Now, as we move on, how then are we delivering according to our milestones? Well, I can tell you that we, for the first 5 months of this year, we have continued to deliver to all of what we have promised. First of all, we have now finalized our commercial cartridge, and it's designed now to be manufactured at very large scale to ensure a competitive low cost of goods. And this also contains all the reagents required to complete the test with dried cartridge chemistry. Why do I mention this? Well, we thereby avoid the complexity and cost of expensive liquid reagents and blister packs. Second, we have also appointed the Scottish Flex Medical Solutions as our manufacturing partner for a cartridge. They are a specialist contract manufacturer up in Scotland, and they have now a fully validated facilities. We have also, during this first 5 months, been able, through a thorough due diligence, to select MDX CRO, a Spanish CRO company, who will be responsible now to help us with the clinical performance studies going forward. And we have selected them not only based on their reputation for excellence and comprehensive research capabilities, but also because they are specialized in regulatory compliance, which has become increasingly important given the new IVDR regulations. We have also communicated here a week ago that we, on this new commercial cartridge, have been able to show robust performance, where we now have incorporated an internal cartridge quality control on each and every cartridge, positive and negative, and thereby we can ensure that every test result is validated. We have also, a week ago, we were extremely happy, and I was very proud of my team, that we were able to receive a very prestigious British grant of as much as 17 million Swedish crowns for the further development of our Syros point-of-care system. This is not only a very significant monetary amount of 17 million, but it's also an external endorsement of this single molecule counting technology that lies in the heart of our system. This money now will be used already. We have planned for making a pre-validation study, so we are thereby able to secure an optimal outcome of the full performance study that we are to perform next year. And I can also tell you now that we will, for the very first time, use our prototypes to be tested with fresh blood from chest pain patients at C2 at St. Thomas Hospital in London. Moreover, we are also now able to test it on store samples from as much as 700 healthy subjects and 400 chest pain patients, whereof half of them, 200, actually have a confirmed heart attack. So these data and the results will now be presented later on this year, and that will truly help us to de-risk the full clinical validation coming up next year and to attract industrial partners. So the road now to commercialization you see in front of you, and we're already half through 24, and now we are able to use the grant money we received to conduct these pre-validation studies, and also now we will complete our pilot manufacturing lines, both for the instrument and cartridge. So at the end of this year, marked in red, we will have a commercial point-of-care system ready for clinical validation. Then we will move into early next year, where we then will run into our full clinical performance study, where the results will then be a foundation for our technical file that we will submit into the notified body who will give us the regulatory approval. And thereby we'll have the commercial launch in early 26. So it's only a year and a half from today. So last but not least, what's the interest here on the market then? Well, for point-of-care systems, it has increased significantly after the COVID pandemic. And now the global market is estimated to grow from approximately 38 billion to 78 billion US in the coming 8 years. And I will just give you a few examples of acquisitions that have taken place recently. We have from Roche, end of last year, acquired Lumira for approximately 295 million US. Thermo Fisher acquired Mesa Biotech for 450, and Abbott Alaire, who acquired them for $5.8 billion US. So all in all, I would like to say that today I see a great potential in Prolight Diagnostics based here in Lund, particularly for our digital counting, where we can then count each molecule. We have now seen that there's a very high demand for our system on the market, and I truly see with our groundbreaking user-friendly technology, with all these many unique advantages, I believe we can now see that we will be able to create great value, not only for healthcare, but also for patients that we have talked about this morning, as well as for shareholders. So all in all, we have a very short path to commercialization, only 1.5 years from now. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention. And if you want to learn more about Prolight, please visit our homepage, where you can also find recent company analysis made by Emergers as well as Mangold, and also a number of articles published by BioStock. So with that, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ulf. A very nice presentation. Unfortunately, we have time for just maybe a couple of questions here. We have someone asking, what other biomarkers is Syros measuring?
So, thank you. Well, first of all, we are now finalizing for high-sensitive troponin, and we picked that biomarker on purpose because it's so extreme. I would say it's probably one of the most difficult biomarkers to put on a point-of-care device and get down to the extremely low concentration that is required by the European and US guidelines. In addition, obviously a natural step is to move into other cardiac biomarkers such as D-dimer and BNP. But I want to make it clear, there are just a start. This is the top of an iceberg, because today there are so many other biomarkers that can only be performed in specialized laboratories that now can be moved into this very powerful point-of-care system.
Great. But you also just mentioned some deals, and someone is asking, what is your view for your deal potential within? Sorry, let me start over. Are you viewing your deal potential within the same value frame as the deals you just mentioned? Why or why not?
I would say, since we are having such a potential to bring out a number of new biomarkers from the specialized labs to our little instrument, I would say we would absolutely be in that era, as I presented on the screen.
Great. And the last question, what is most crucial for you to be able to succeed with launching Syros in 2026?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, what is most crucial for you to be able to succeed in the launch of the Syros system in 2026?
Yeah, first of all, we have to, at the end of this year, we are on track with everything to have a final commercial point-of-care system ready. And then obviously we need to go through the clinical validation, the full performance study. There you never can, well, we are not in the power to say how long time it will take for the regulatory agency, in this case the notified body. But it looks very promising. We have already initiated dialogue with them. So for now, I would say it looks very promising, and we should be able to reach launching in early 26.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ulf, for answering the questions and for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Ulf Bladin, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a nice lunch, got some fresh air. Well, to start things off for the afternoon, we have another expert insights session. It's called Market and IPO Trends in the Nordics versus the US. And our expert for this session is Peter Legind-Hansen, Director of Global Listing Services at Nasdaq. Carsten Boring could not make it today. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks. Thank you. And thank you for having me here today. It's always fantastic to be here in Lund. I come all the way from Copenhagen, all the way from Nasdaq in Copenhagen. We are working as a Nordic team, so I have some very close colleagues in Stockholm. And we are covering the biotech space, the healthcare space, the life science space, and of course all other sectors. But the sector here, it's very close to our heart. So let's jump into it. I have made an agenda for today around the markets, how we see them in the Nordic, how we see them in the US, a little bit about the trends, what we see into the IPO space, and I will try as well to give some kind of a small hope for the smaller companies when we are talking about capital. It has been definitely a challenge, but I will come back to that. So, how does the scene look like in the Nordic? We have around 200 companies listed within the healthcare space. 150 of those, they are from Sweden, and many of you are also here today. Some very small ones, and of course we have some very, very large one as well. So when it comes to market cap, it is definitely in Copenhagen. We see the most of it, Novo Nordisk as a good example, but the number of companies, you have a lot here in Sweden. And that back to the hope, and back to where we see the markets right now. This is a very nice picture of an index we don't use that often. It's all companies in the Nordic on the main market, so more than 600 companies. If you look at the small arrow, it's going up. And when we look at all the different indices we're going to see today, I mean, from it was around October, November last year, there happened something around the interest rate that made this. So what's important here is to look at the larger indices like this one is almost all-time high, which is meaning the investors are getting a very nice return, which hopefully also should have a spillover effect to some of the smaller companies. That has we definitely seen in the past. So when the companies are becoming too expensive, you need to divert a little bit, put it into some smaller tickets in other interesting companies, and we have a lot. Another fun fact here is maybe that Novo Nordisk, if you take the 14 largest Swedish company, they have the same market cap as Novo Nordisk today. So it's insane. It's insane what Novo Nordisk has become. And I know AstraZeneca you have as well here, but they're not covering that much because it's not a Swedish entity anymore. So just saying that Novo Nordisk is 20% of the market cap when we look into the all-share index in the Nordic, 20%. And back to some of the other indices, we have first, the most interesting one, maybe also for you here. It's First North Healthcare Nordic, and as you can see here, it's a little bit from the top and down to the bottom. And then you can say, what happened? Yeah, you have all been there. We know the numbers that came into the market in 20 and 21. Zero interest rate, a fantastic climate for everything, especially also on the exchange. So we saw a lot of companies coming into the market. Some will maybe say too many. We heard that as well today, maybe also from our friend from the venture fund. And then you can say, what is then the problem? One of the problems is, of course, that back to investors, a lot of private investors came into them, which is good, but it should also had some more professional in to being there from, you can say, almost from inception to commercialization, or at least some of the way. So not that interesting to jump in to capital raises if you don't have a good backup for the larger company. So that is what we are seeing. But on the other hand, you can say almost the only way is up from now on. And back to the index before, it's almost all-time high, so there will be a spillover to the other index by time. It's more a question of when. Small cap index in Nordic, more than 200 companies. In the First North, we have more than 100 companies, also on the way up. So, yeah, everything is as it should be here. And back to the numbers again. It was some insane years in 20 and 21 when it comes to the number of listings. You have the number of listings over here. We saw listings. When we say listings, it's not only IPOs in our way we calculate it. It is also moved from Spotlight to Nasdaq. It's moved up from First North to main market and so on. But you can have a look at the numbers, 166 in 21. So far this year on First North, 3. And again, so the only way is up from here. What we are seeing in the market right now is some more interest. We also are coming to see some more listings, definitely some more listings in the months to come. especially in Sweden, and also after the summer break. So, I mean, it's heating up, but pretty slowly. And again, once again, this is the turnover and the number of trades in the First North shares. And again, you can see a huge peak in 21, and then it went down as we are now. So we have got from before in 19 and 18, there was around 300 companies on First North. Today we are around 500. So still there, you have a per number of listed company, a lower turnover on a daily basis compared to before. So there's definitely room for improvement, and we should definitely have the investor appetite back and the risk appetite back. But again, as we know right now, with an interest rate pretty high, hopefully going a little bit down, but it's very complex and has been for pretty long time. So let's see how it will go with the inflation rate, and hopefully it will go a bit lower, because we need to have some more activity around this, and definitely the interest rate will help on that. One good case we had, and that's also back to the numbers, we had a very interesting case last year. I know the Danes know this one, probably also some of the Swedes. It was Cupra. They went into the market in a pretty awful time at the year in the spring. There was a lot of crisis with the banks, but they managed to do it. And you can say why? Yeah, maybe because they have some figures, they have a result, they have a two-leg strategy, they have the biotech and all that, and then they also have a service leg. So they managed to do it. They are 3 founders, and whether the price was 10, 9, or 11 didn't mean that much to them. So they floated it, and as many of you also know, it has been a pretty nice journey when suddenly the whole world wanted to have not obesity, they didn't want to have it, but at least when suddenly it was top of the mind. So interesting, pretty slow start, and suddenly people found out that they also have some potential drugs in that area, and then a story. But again, as you also know, in this area with life science, it will go up. Right now, it's very modern, everything about that, and let's see in a half year's time what will be modern. I don't know, but that's at least how we see it right now. Back to the US. Where are we now? Just set the scene again here. So how many companies do we have in the US? We have around 5,700 listed companies in total. A little less than that, 3,300 is on Nasdaq in New York. And pretty large company we have here. Around 20% of all our listed company on Nasdaq is within the biotech. So I mean, very important for us in the US as well. When we look into this again, just to mind the arrow up here, Novo Nordisk is number 12 largest company in the US compared to a lot of the other ones. You know, you only have Eli Lilly as a larger one, and then it's again insane to see how much they have in market cap and how much they mean for, especially also the society in Denmark. When we look into the biotech as well, interesting to see that you have one also here in top 6, GenMap. So a large player as well. So fantastic we can have these players from the Nordic coming into the US. We of course also have some very small listed companies, and they struggle the same way as you see here in the Nordic. Some will say more, even more. So again, a fantastic index here. It's only going one way from from again in November up. Right now, all-time high, and you see all-time high in S&P and Dow Jones as well. Back to the story, when we are going to see that, that will definitely give some more interest for the smaller companies. So that's where we see the hope now. What that will mean also is probably something about the IPOs. I will come back to that. When we look into the small cap in the US, and this is biotech as well, yeah, it looked like almost what you saw before with the First North. A very nice top in February. Different from here is maybe that they have more professional investors into it, and still you can see how it declined. And it started, I mean, it topped out in February 21. And that was at the time where we had the first something around the interest rate that will come and impact, and the Fed would probably go into some consideration to increase the rates. So you can say this is the most risk index we have in the US, and you can say how fast it went down when suddenly somebody maybe felt that there will be some impact on the interest rate. So room for improvement as well here. Number of US listings, again, it looks almost like what we saw in the Nordic. Pretty insane year 21. More than 1,000, and this is IPOs, this is not listings, this is fully IPOs. And back to a pretty poor year last year, and this year we had 75. So again, heating up slowly. Within the biotech scene, on the right-hand side, I showed what we saw at listings in the US last year. Not that many biotech companies, around 20 in this, I can see. But what we have seen in the first quarter this year in the US is a capital raise that is 3 times as high like the quarter last year as a Q1. So I mean, it is heating up slowly. The tick sizes are becoming bigger, but still compared to before the crisis and the pandemic, I mean, when you want to go to the US at that time, especially for the companies in the Nordic, there was definitely a capital raise above 100 million USD to go into the market. And typically also local. But I mean, in the meantime, we have seen some very small companies listed in the US. I would say some of them at the size at First North, capital raises of 10 million USD, even below. But that numbers are going up now again, and hopefully also hitting into the biotech space. So that was the market. Now we have some new thing that we are going to look into to predict and look a little bit more into the forecast of IPO going forward. This is the Nasdaq US IPO Pulse Index that's made 3-4 months ago. It's updated each quarter, and it will forecast how the direction will be and how many listings we then should have. And now I have pointed up the 6 factors that are put into this. So it's something about interest rate, something about returns, valuations, investor sentiments, and so on. So let's look into Q1 and see how it looks. It looks great. But let's see whether that will stand. So what we're seeing here is every time, back to 2015, every time you see the gray area, the green one is going down. The green one, that is a number of listings in the US per quarter. So gray, and then the white one, yeah, then it's chipping up again or going in average. And the blue one then, yeah, that is the one that all these six factors are put down into to predict what we are seeing going forward. So it's 5 or 6 months ahead of where we are now. So the forecast says this is going up. So the green one needs to follow up. So Q1 was around 40 listings, and then it should follow up. Otherwise, we can't use it. But again, this is made by some clever people in the US. My fingers crossed for it will keep. They have looked a lot of data back in time, and it seems like it is working. So fingers crossed for at least for the IPO part, which also will mean more capital into already listed companies and so on. So by that, I definitely hope this will work. And just look into the numbers just to give you a little bit more understanding of what we saw in Q1 then. So yeah, the interest rate, it went down 1 year back. The VIX index is also this volatility index we always are looking on. Pretty tricky it has been, you can say, back in the days, 2-3 years ago, when we have a low VIX around 15, there was a lot of IPOs. Now it's around 12. That's not the case. So it went a little bit up year over year. Returns, yeah, just look back at the first index. I mean, fantastic returns to S&P and so on, and Nasdaq. Valuations, yeah, going up, and investors' sentiment the same in the US. And then the last one, Nasdaq data, that's some internal things that we also are putting into this. So by that, it looks very positive going forward. Then, of course, I know there's a lot of other things into this. One is the interest rate, geopolitics, everything. But at least this tells us we are in the right direction. Again, just a picture of the VIX, just to show you how it goes. It is like the VIX, every time you see some huge events coming into the market, you could see it back in 20, the pandemic, it goes very fast up. And back to where we are now, you almost have a VIX, a volatility index, as low as you can have. So you can say, by that, we should see a lot of listings. At least it was like that before. General trends, and also a little bit more about the IPOs, and a kind of a sum up of what I've been talking about here. So again, the interest rate, it is tricky. It has been tricky. It's going down, but still, when we compared the 10 years interest rate in US, I mean, right now it's the same as in 2007. So it is. Some will say high, or I will just say it's normal, and we are back to normal. The right cocktail on investors, back to that point again, yeah, you need to have some long-only investors into your case as well. It is very nice to have the private investors, especially on the exchange, to set the daily prices. But it is important to have some long investors interested in to take the next round, go into the market, and back you up. So very important. And back to that, there is a lot of money, you know it. There is a lot of money out there. But again, for the right cases, a lot of selectivity, a lot of interest in very late stage companies, very interested in putting a lot of money in large tickets in the late stage company. But again, that will change. We have seen that over the years. It's more a question of when. And then again, one thing we sometimes forget, I mean, a lot of the companies that are here today, I believe you are more mature today than you were 3 years ago when your share price topped. So you're coming closer to the final end goal of the company. Maybe you have got a more sustainable company as well. But when you're looking at your share price, it's halved, it's 20%, it's 10%. at least a lot of the smaller ones. I know the larger ones, it's another case when you are cash positive suddenly. So, I mean, by that, it's important to think that, I mean, you are closer to the endpoint, and the investors know as well. So, interesting, and a lot of good companies to pick up on. And again, I mean, the flagship index, as mentioned, yeah, they are all on all-time high, and by that you can say a lot of the companies and the listed companies are very expensive. So the smaller ones are maybe more fair priced. Some will say cheap, and also my last sentence here is why we're waiting for the IPOs. There's a lot of good investment around you also in this area today. So I mean, for the investors, it's probably time to connect to them and to know them better. And then let's see where it all ends. At least I'm very positive for the year to come and the year after. So it will be interesting to follow. I think that was the words.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, for a very interesting presentation. Cautiously optimistic, can we say that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience, perhaps? We have a couple of questions maybe for Peter. Jonas.
I happen to have a question. Now, seeing as, I mean, it was great to see the graphs where the little green arrows were pointing upwards. I think everyone can use some optimism, but if we are more of healthy skeptics, do you think, or it could be a hard question, but do you think that the biotech sector, which has had a really rough time now, since the extreme years in 2020, 2021, that do you think this sector in particular has more of an uphill struggle regaining the confidence of investors, seeing as so many companies have seen their market caps go down by 40 to 90% or something?
Yeah, I mean, at least I think, I mean, we're all private investors, and I think we all have some shares in some of the companies that have been hit very hard. And of course, that will be a bit more difficult to understand why you should go into a new IPO within a biotech company. On the other hand, you can say, by time, people luckily forget and also have shares in larger company, so they are hopefully ready again to go into that. So, but I'm fully agree. It is difficult to see, especially maybe on the IPO scene right now for the smaller IPOs within the biotech sector. On the other hand, you can say for the already listed companies, back to some of my comments here, I mean, some of them, if you pick the right ones, they can have such a nice journey from here. And hopefully some of them are getting the right investors in as well, as we heard earlier in one of the earlier seen here today from Hans, that they've suddenly got, because they worked a lot to get the right investors in, finally find some investors that are interested in also to invest in already listed companies. So I mean, for the already listed companies, and then with the very fair and very low share prices, I mean, hopefully, I believe that I mean, you're not putting all your eggs in the same basket. So I hope that will happen now, and we can see it in some company as well, also within the biotech.
Any other questions?
Yes, you said that there are lots of Swedish companies listed at Nasdaq.
Yeah.
Do you see this as a positive or negative? Do you recommend us Swedish companies to come to Nasdaq or wait?
I mean, I mean, one of our things to be in this ecosystem is like we are an exchange. And I mean, an exchange is a place where you find capital, even via an IPO or via capital raise if you're already listed. So, I mean, it is, as I mentioned, a very interesting sector for us. We are part of the ecosystem. I know, of course, we earn a lot more money on the very large one, like Novo Nordisk, because they create a lot of trading in our system as well. But it's a part of our DNA in Nasdaq, also out of the US. There's a lot of small biotech companies there as well. So, no, happy to join us and be a part of the family.
I'm actually a bit curious myself. As an American, do those forecasts factor in the Trump factor?
Yeah, maybe I'll just think of these 6 factors. I mean, I don't know if we can put Trump into one of those factors, but yeah, I think it will it covered in one way or another. You can say maybe he will be into. I mean, at the time when Biden came into the office, I mean, the interest rate started to change and started to raise pretty quickly after that. So there could be an effect on the prediction of, for instance, the interest rate if he will come into the House. I don't know, or the other way. So, well, let's see.
A lot of exciting times ahead. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I see we have a couple more minutes on the clock. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you look at the index, I'll try to be loud. Okay. When you showed the indices for life science companies, I suppose that included both biotech companies as well as medtech companies.
Yeah.
If you were to drill down into those 2 columns, would you see any difference between the performance of life science companies, biotech companies versus medtech companies?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I haven't seen that. We don't break it that much down in our indices. You can say this index is covered by all this more than 110 companies, and of course there'll be some pretty large ones as well. Vimian is one of them. So they cover, I think, 30% in the index or something like that. But I don't have the figures. I don't know. Some of the medtech companies, health tech companies that have had some pretty hard time as well. So I don't have a fully answer to that. Yeah.
You said anyway that you expect the number of IPOs to go up.
Yeah.
Do you expect the valuations to go up?
I mean, if you look into the US, for instance, the last year, they cover, for instance, the IPO index to S&P 500. So they cover all the time and look into how will that go on this side. And they are almost the same right now, you can say, in other times. So I think the payoff has been a return has been around 6% for the one listed 1 year ago in the US. And the same for the S&P. No, it's higher, but it's pretty much the same. The valuation, back to that again, I mean, you will always start in a lower level, and then it will pick up, depending on the case. So back to that again. But what I think we are going to see, at least also in the Nordic, when we look into the IPO market, we are going to see some more mature cases. And by that, you can say the valuation will be higher, or should be higher. Yeah.
I'm afraid we'll have to leave it at that. We'll go to the next presentation. But thank you so much.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
So our next company presentation is Amplio Pharma, and here to present the company is Vice President Karin von Wachenfeldt. Welcome, Karin.
Thank you. So it's a great pleasure to be here and talk about my passion and talk about developing medicines. And I don't very often get the chance to present this company anymore because we've actually moved from Sweden to the Netherlands. And since I'm here in Lund, this was a unique opportunity and I couldn't resist. So Amplio Pharma, delivering validated medicines amplified. And that's really why we're called Amplio Pharma. Amplio, because we do find good medicines that are validated and that delivers already good value, but that then has something that doesn't really work perfectly. And we amplify them. We make them better. So our mission is to combine sustainable drug development with affordable pharmaceutical healthcare for an ever-expanding aging population. Sustainability, making sure that a lot of people can actually get access to medicine is one of our core sort of aims. And I think that's something that I see from more and more companies, that people are starting to think about this. We cannot just think about getting the highest price for our drug. Our history then, I wanted to say a few words. We started the company, actually the idea was cooked up in 2016. We filed the patents in 17. We started the company in 20 here in Lund, and we actually transferred to Leiden, Netherlands in May last year. We're a team of 3 passionate female founders with a long experience in pharmaceutical development. We have now both in the US and in Europe patent protection for our amplified methotrexate. We've won some prizes for sort of best startups, etc., but that I couldn't take the claim for that. But we also have a whole set of data that we've actually generated internally and that the ideas are built upon. So this is the team. Marguerite Mensenides, she's our CEO and she's located mostly in Leiden. She's a pharmacist from the beginning with a long-standing experience from AstraZeneca as a medicinal chemist and as also a pharmacologist. Then it's me. I'm mostly here in Lund, working with Truly Translational and Truly Labs that I founded together with our third partner here, Charlotte Brunmark. And that's where you find us most of the time. But this is really a project that builds on a lot of what we have been doing. We want to develop drugs, we want to do it in a sustainable fashion, and we want to deliver something that actually can make a difference to people. We were located in the Öresund region. Commercial advisors then, of course, have to be from Denmark. Henrik Fenninger has a super long experience with methotrexate, and Lars Gasmussen is pharmacology veterinarian. We've been able to recruit a lot of good KOLs, and I start with the lower one, Robert Housinger. I'm not very good at pronouncing his Dutch name, but he's really a key person in EULAR committees, etc., and he's a real fan of what we're doing. Joel Kramer and Michael Weinblatt came on as KOLs when we got the US patent approved, and if you're in the area of rheumatoid arthritis, you probably know who these guys are. Joel Kramer also is a person who did some of the groundbreaking scientific findings that are we're basing our work on. So we moved from Lund to Holland, and it's not only because Holland is a nice place to be, it's also because in Sweden, we were not able to really raise a big interest. When I come, or when Marguerite or Lotte come and say methotrexate, people say, John. When we go to Holland, people are actually interested. There's many different groups working at the universities, in prestigious groups, clinical groups, scientific, translational, who do research and who are really excited about this molecule and what it can do. We also found available funding and a development team for our clinical development. And, oh, I thought there was a, yes. Let's see, so right now I'm, for example, working with Naomi to develop our clinical protocol. This I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Rheumatoid arthritis, there is a big market, and methotrexate is the first-line therapy. So it already holds a big position. And that's what we are intending to take our part of. So how do I see this amplifying methotrexate? What do I mean? So methotrexate is actually a prodrug. And if you're not into methotrexate biology, this is something that you may not know. You just think that it's a drug, and it's, it used to be quite toxic, and then people got the hang of how to use it, and it's actually now very safe and efficacious in about 40% of patients with rheumatoid arthritis. It's a very good drug. Then there's, of course, 60 other percents that we could potentially take part of that share as well. So I told you that Joel Kramer did some initial work on understanding the biology of why and how methotrexate works. So it's a prodrug, and what happens is it's getting polyglutamated. You put on these polyglutamates and it gets a long tail. And the more polyglutamates you get coupled to your methotrexate molecule, the more effective it becomes. In many of the patients that do not respond very well, actually what you can see is that you never get to this stage where the methotrexate is really able to work at its best. What we have found is a formulation that actually pushes this equilibrium towards the highly polyglutamated species. And by doing so, of course, we hope, this is what we need to prove, that the patients will respond as they currently do. And what do we base this on? Well, right now there is a company in the US called Exogen. They actually have a test that's called a VICE methotrexate. And that measures polyglutamated species in red blood cells of these patients. And what you can see is the patients that have a high level of polyglutamated species in their red blood cells, these ones are good responders. And then they can actually see, well, since it takes a very long time for you to really get the full benefit of the methotrexate, if you're not one of these people, you may want to shift. And that's logical, and I think that's how it should be done. But this also tells us that there is quite a lot of data indicating that these polyglutamated species are really prognostics. So in Amsterdam, we have found a group that works with refining this biomarker, so that it can now also be used as an efficacy biomarker, where you measure directly in the white blood cells of patients taking our drug, and we can see if before they take our drug, they are maybe somewhere here, and that we can push it towards here. So this is what we think we can do. We can enhance treatment response, increase a higher level of responders. We can get a targeted and safer medicine and cost-effective healthcare. And in this clinical trial that I'm designing currently together with Naomi and Marguerite, we will actually be able to already in the first phase 1 study get a proof of principle or maybe even proof of concept through this biomarker studies. So with that, I think I'm almost done. I think there is an attractiveness in being a Dutch company that actually makes money multiply. And that's why I would say, if you're interested, even though we're now a Dutch company, come talk to me, because we are raising money and could actually be a very good and nice global investment. With that, thank you very much for your attention. And I will be here today if anybody wants to talk to me, and Marguerite will be here tomorrow. So please go and talk to her.
Thank you so much, Karin. Well, we do have a few questions here for you. First of all, what are some of the benefits of being a Dutch company?
So first, we actually moved to Holland because there was this scientific interest. So for us, it was a match between our project and the science base and interest. But what we figured out once we moved there was that there is actually a lot of incentives for companies building businesses in Holland that are formed a little bit different from how they are here. There's less IPOs in small biotech there, and maybe that's why they've chosen a different model.
Along those lines, could you expand on your market strategy?
I can expand on the market strategy a little bit, just looking at this one. So the market strategy is we are intending to actually deliver a phase 2 proof of concept study, and then partner with pharma companies that are actually, most of them that have shown interest are already in the business. And of course, they would really like for having this proprietary methotrexate formulation rather than having their competitors sitting on the same. So that's an exchange for one drug to a similar but now better performing drug.
And how about your financing strategy? Could you tell us more about that?
Yes. So, I've been going the wrong way. We are raising money. So we currently have grants that we got from LEH, which is associated with Leiden University. And but we need to raise the money for the phase 1. We have part of it, but we need a little bit more. And we have a number of people actually being interested. It works a little bit different. We are mostly interested in getting funding from angels, family offices, private investors, because the tickets are still rather small. And what we can see from talking to, for example, venture capital is that we're slightly too small and maybe slightly too early yet for them.
Well, I think we have time for maybe one more question. You say your drug can amplify the clinical effect of methotrexate, benefiting 70% of RA patients instead of the current 30-40%, correct? What is preventing the reach to 100%?
A couple of things. First of all, being realistic. I think when we, not everybody will respond to the same therapy. And I think although RA is not maybe as heterogeneous a disease as some of the others I've worked with, like COPD, or there's still nuances and there's still a variability in the patient population. I think the TNFs are really successful. In many countries, TNFs, for example, are given together on top of methotrexate. That's not so commonly done here, but that's actually the guidelines in most of Europe, for example. And it also helps prevent development of autoantibodies towards the anti-TNFs, for example. So there's I would say that there's also some patients that actually cannot tolerate methotrexate, and that we know, and those should not get it. So there will never be 100%. But it could actually be quite close if you think of this, that you combine with, first you go on methotrexate alone, and then you combine it also when you get into the biologics as it's currently prescribed.
Still, the extra benefit is quite significant there. So, well, thank you so much, Karin, for your presentation and for answering the questions.
Yeah, and thank you for all the nice questions.
All right. Next up, we have Simsen Diagnostics. Yes, I forgot my sheet. So, and here to present the company, Pontus Rehn, CEO. Thank you, Pontus.
So, first public presentation since before the pandemic. So let's see how this works out. First of all, thank you so much for the organizer inviting me to Lund. I'm very happy to be back here because for me it's been a place of change and evolution. I went to university here. During that time I also met a girl that is today my wife. So now it's like 4 children, 3 dogs, just 1 wife, but there you go. But it's also the city where I began my career in the life science industry. I took on a job for Gambro, selling dialysis equipment. And since then, I basically stayed true to that industry. And it's a great industry to be in. Now I find myself working with cancer diagnostics. I was appointed CEO only 2 months ago, so please bear with me if I can't answer all your questions. If I can't, I'll make sure to find out those answers instead. What we do is we can detect very, very early signs of residual or recurring cancers, sometimes years before you can find them on imaging. Pretty much to date, 31 years ago, my mother passed away in a breast cancer that relapsed and spread through her body. I don't know, obviously, if our technology could have meant any sort of difference to her. I do know that if we build this company and we can make our technology available to many more patients, others will benefit. Of that, I'm quite certain. I took this job because I truly believe we can make a real difference to everyone with cancer, to everyone developing drugs for cancer, and everyone treating those with cancer. In short, what we set out to do is to unleash that insight that is necessary to make cancer finally a curable disease. Today's challenges in cancer care is late detection of relapse. With our technology, as I said before, we can detect relapse up to years before we can do it with, say, imaging. Uncertainty of treatment efficiency. Again, we use live biomarkers, so we can see if any sort of treatment is effective or not within the hour. It's that short a time. Failure to detect remaining disease, say after a surgery, is there still some parts left of the tumor? We can do it with a simple blood test. What we do, or how we do it, is that we look at ctDNA. That stands for circulating tumor DNA. All cells die, as you know, and when they do, they will emit genes or parts of their DNA into the bloodstream. When cancer cells die, it's called ctDNA. So we find these ctDNA, and they exist only for a matter of hours before they sort of dissolve in the blood. So that's why it's a live biomarker. If we find it, there's something emitting it, and that is a tumor. This pretty much shows where we come in. When a cancer is diagnosed, there is an immediate treatment. We can see whether that is efficient or not. Then there is an intervention. So is there anything left of that tumor after the intervention? We can see that with our technology. Again, we detect relapses very, very soon. And when those relapses are being treated, we can monitor the effectiveness of that treatment. How we do it? Well, there are different ways of analyzing ctDNA. Sometimes you just look for one specific gene because that will be telling you whether you should be using one drug or the other with all this, personalized medicine. We do not do that. Or you can have panels that look for specific mutations that are normally found in, say, breast cancer. However, your mutation may have parts of what is known to be common mutations, or may have none of those common mutations. So there's always a high risk that they won't be able to detect ctDNA for your specific cancer. What we do is that we get the biopsy. There's always a biopsy taken when you're diagnosed with cancer. That biopsy gives us insight into your specific mutations. And those are the ones we look for. We don't just look for needles in a haystack. We look for very specific needles, the one that are your needles. As far as customers goes, we have two major customer segments, biopharmas and clinics. Biopharmas, we primarily focus now on the various clinical trial phases. So that's where we get in and we basically check whether a candidate is successful or not, or to what extent. That, of course, can save a whole lot of money because you can kill certain candidates quite soon if we find that, no, it's not working. We can also pre-select candidates to be included in those trials. So if you want to try your candidates on 200 patients, we can cut them down to 50 patients and still be as accurate and relevant. We're also currently validating our technology for preclinical trials. We require only a very small piece of blood, so we can do multiple tests on, say, mice, for example. And then finally, we also look at clinics because of them following up their patients, obviously, and finding relapses as soon as possible and monitor the treatment efficacy afterwards. But main focus today lies within the clinical trials. How we go to market is directly to the biopharmas or through the CROs. CROs, it's like going to a few to go basically to reach many. They already have existing customer connections with biopharmas, so obviously it makes sense for us to join forces with biopharma, with CROs to be part of their portfolio. But we also approach already today biopharmas directly. Clinics, we can also approach directly or through certain labs. Again, the same logic applies, going to few to reach many. And finally, we can do kits, but that is not our core business. Kits are these pre-designed panels that you use to find cancer based on the most common mutations. We can do it. It's sort of like sometimes you need to have it in your portfolio, but we're not focusing on it, and we're certainly not going to be a manufacturer of those. We're going to design it and leave it for others to manufacture. There are such discussions ongoing. We had our first customer last year, so it wasn't due to anything to do with me, obviously. I only been here for 2 months. But we came in at slightly below 1 million SEK. Today's forecast look like we're going to come in around 4 million SEK, and it's perfectly viable to go for 250 million SEK by 2030. That's actually in the lower level of my expectations. The market is certainly there. What we're struggling with a bit is within academia, it's a fairly well-known concept, ctDNA, its advantages. Whereas with some of our customers, they are knowing about ctDNA analysis, but not always about the pros and cons of it. So there's some education we still need to do. We do it fairly well, I have to say. Short-term plan ahead. We were selected by Business Sweden to be part of their Catalyst program with a focus on entering the UK. So that's our first market outside of the Nordics. So there's going to be a lot of things going on in the UK in the near future. We expect to sign the first customer later this year. Also, as we have ongoing agreements, or sorry, not agreements, discussions with CROs, an international one in particular, we expect that to be finalized sometime end Q3. We're going for a laboratory-developed test, which is needed to work with clinics. Today, when we work with clinics, it has to be research use only. With the LDT in place, we can work directly with clinics and have them use it as a decision tool. And we're preparing for additional market entries, as well as obviously working to get more biopharma customers. As far as geographic entries and geographical expansion goes, our philosophy is that we should really get a firm foothold in certain markets and not be thinly spread around the globe. So we're in the Nordics. We're going to expand to the UK. UK is good because they have very well-defined clusters of biopharma companies. Oxford, Cambridge, Manchester, London. Same thing with Switzerland, also kind of well-defined clusters. So that's where we're going next, and it sort of makes sense to go from there to Germany. After that, I don't know yet. We may enter the US. It's not been decided. We want to have a firm foothold in these markets. One differentiator for us is to deliver an outstanding excellence in customer experience. Therefore, we must have a firm foothold of a market before we expand elsewhere. We must always ensure that we can deliver that customer experience before we go anywhere else. It is possible to outgrow your abilities, and we don't want to do that. So to recap, we can discover cancer relapses sooner. We can provide relevant insight on treatment effectiveness, but also on dosage setting. I didn't mention that before, which is really important, especially when you treat children, to get the right dosage so you don't over-treat them, which will cause more harm. And it shortens the time for biopharma companies in clinical trials, which of course is a lot of cost saving and potentially also a faster route to the market. I don't even see a clock here, so I don't know where I'm. But so, are these slides going to be distributed afterwards?
I'm not sure about the slides themselves. Do you know?
All right, so if they are or not, we have an excellent board of directors, a lot of good, relevant experience. We have a perhaps slightly more excellent team working inside Simsen. And with that, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Pontus. Sorry, I should have pointed out there is a clock right there. So a little too late, but that's okay. We can still get to...
It says overtime, doesn't it?
Yeah. One question. Yeah, there are actually several questions here, but if we don't get to your questions, just a reminder, perhaps Pontus can answer them in the coffee break later on.
Perhaps.
Is your technique effective regardless of cancer type?
Solid tumor cancer, so not leukemia, but otherwise, yes.
That was quick, so could you expand on how you came to that 250 million SEK target?
It's very hard to estimate the market potential because everyone trying to do so comes up with different numbers, and you never know whether it's just the analysis or if it's also including the equipment, etc. But I'm seeing the growth, I'm seeing the number of clinical trials in Europe. So yes, I mean, it's sort of, yes, it is guesswork, but it's also some intelligence included in that guesswork to look at the potential because of the number of ongoing trials, the upcoming trials, the international expansion, going into preclinical trials, And we already have discussions with clinics that are interested in working with us, even if it's just research use only. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. But thank you so much for your presentation, Pontus, and for answering the questions.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for being
Thank you
here.
for listening.
All right, well, now we're going to give space to 3 elevator pitches. They're going to be 5 minutes each. If there is time, maybe we have time for 1 question for each presenter. We'll see. First up, I'd like to invite Envue Technologies CEO Andreasson. There you are.
Oh, yes. Okay, good. And I see the watch. I will keep within the time. So, over 6 years ago, Bill Gates warned us, we are not ready for the next pandemic. And COVID-19 will not be the last one. But to develop new vaccines and drugs, we must understand, study, and analyze the biomolecules of life. And until today, over 95% of the drugs we use targets proteins in our bodies and are based on small molecules. But since the pandemic, we see a change. We are all part of a new era where we see the entire industry is moving towards nanomedicines, using the same technology that was introduced by BioNTech and Pfizer, where they deliver the mRNA directly into our bodies by packaging them into these lipid nanoparticles. And this new technology also see an expansion for cell therapies, gene therapies, and also personalized medicines, which shows a huge new potential, but it also comes with a lot of new challenges and questions, which shows an unclear, unmet need on the market, where the researcher and also the regulatory actors are actively looking for new technologies and standards. Envue Technologies develops a patent core technology called nanofluidic scattering microscopy. Using a cutting-edge combination of nanotechnology and light, we are at the forefront of pushing the limits and address these new questions. So by using a combination of a hardware instrument, nanofluidic chip, and a software, we enable more accurate and efficient nanoparticle characterization. And we provide a novel bioanalytical instrument to improve the insights all the way from early R&D preclinical phases towards clinical quality control. Because we want to be part of helping and enabling the next generations of nanomedicines. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. So, quick question. In what way is your innovation disruptive?
So we have what's so-called label-free technology. And that means that we don't modify the non-objects we are looking at. So the traditional method, you have to label them because they're too small to look at with the conventional microscopy methods. So you put on a label, which modifies the objects.
All right, I see we have time for maybe one more question. How does your innovation relate to future pandemics?
So, as I mentioned, we see it as an enabling tool for the researcher and industry who develops new vaccines. So the earlier they get insights and more data, the faster the processes and the less risk for failure later on in the process.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. All right. Well, I will go ahead and give space to the next presenter, but thank you so much, Ellen, for your presentation.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Sorbus Biomedical, and CEO Rönn will present. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. So yeah, very good presentations before. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Roger Rönn. I am the founder and CEO of Sorbus Biomedical, a small startup company here in Medicon Village at the Smile Incubator. And I will discuss our company and how we create innovative equipment for radically superior and sustainable cell cultivation. So I am a researcher with a lot of experience working with cells in the lab. When we work with cells in the lab today, there's a lot of problems. It's very complicated, takes a lot of time, it's extremely expensive, also very frustrating, because often when you handle cells in the lab, the quality of the cells decline very rapidly, which limits what you can do. Normally the thing that you want to do is that you then scale up to compensate for this poor quality, further increasing the cost and the time that you need to spend. So when I did my research as a PhD student at Lund University, I saw that the big reason why we have a hard time to fulfill the potential of stem cell biology is that technically how we work with the cells in the lab today gives the cells an environment that's very different from the body environment. This leads to functional decay. This is the big problem. We need to change how we handle cells in the lab. And that's our mission. So at Sorbus Biomedical, we have developed a new type of cell cultivation system. It's a benchtop device that gives you unique improvements and increased value for cell cultivation. It also gives you very good cost savings. It cuts down the use of gas. And it's also very good if you want to reduce your environmental impact. It's intended to complement or supplement the current day technologies of the day. So with this device, you can grow any cells and tissues that you can grow with normal technology, but anywhere that you want in the lab. Here you see some pictures from our system. So you have pluripotent stem cells, cancer, and also organ biopsies. The good thing is that you can then fully control and recreate body-like conditions with your device. This gives you a yield increase, which we have also demonstrated in our lab. And as I mentioned, due to the unique design, our system is a closed-loop system. There are no doors to open, there's no spillage of gas. So you can significantly reduce the amount of gas that you need down to more than 95%. This could save you hundreds, if not thousands of crowns of gas per week, but it very much depends on your experimental parameters. So we are going to price this device based on what the high-end hypoxic incubator costs today at around 10,000 euros plus tax. We are estimating a margin of about 69%. And when it comes to the user base, we have estimated about 19,500 users in Sweden today, giving us a total addressable market of about 195 million euros. Globally, the global market is about 47.3 times bigger than Sweden at 9.2 billion euros. And we are an innovation-focused company. We do not intend to have a sales arm to go global. Instead, we want to have a business-to-business relationship with established supplier organizations, and we already have a very good communication with both Biotechne and Thermo Fisher, one of who have actually committed to provide us with the reagents to further generate more data to take this to the market. User interest is very strong. We talk with a lot of different users that see value in using our technology, either in collaboration or to improve their own internal efforts. The competition, we are very aware of our competition, and our device have unique advantages over the current day available technologies. We have a pending patent at the EU level that's going to PCT now in the summer. And this is our developmental roadmap. We're looking to raise 6 million Swedish crowns for 15 months of activity, taking what we currently have functioning in the lab, putting it in a nice metal body, generating about 25 units. And this is going to be the first units that we put into the hands of the users. And we are looking specifically at India, at a governmental agency that's going to be our first users and also give us our first revenue. And with that, I would like to round off and acknowledge all the people that have been supporting us throughout the development of Sorbus Biomedical, Smile Incubator, and also the Skapa Stiftelsen that awarded us as a regional winner last year. Also Stenko Johansson Stiftelse and Vinnova. And yeah, this was a very brief presentation. So if any one of you want to ask me more questions, I will be at the dinner tonight. Just find me and we'll continue the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. Unfortunately, we don't have time for further questions now, but as you said, hopefully people can meet you later on and ask you some questions later on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Next up, we have Colzyx and CEO Karin Bryder is here to present.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karin.
Hi. Most of you probably seen me before, and I'm just going to show this. I didn't expect that we had actually I needed to use both hands. But just to show you this is what I'm going to talk about, this kind of white thingy here. So my name is Karin Bryder, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Colzyx. Colzyx works with a peptide technology that we're using in wound care, and especially then for chronic wounds. Chronic wounds are usually infected, and they are high maintenance for the health system. Patients that has a chronic wound would be needed to go to the clinic every week, twice a week, 3 times a week to meet a nurse to have their wounds cared for. Our aim is that this should shorten. You should not have to do that year after year after year. And also the burden for the patient, the agony they have, we would like to lower that. So with that said, over 10 million patients, and then of course a huge market. In addition, if one puts this on very heavy inflicted wounds on horse legs, the veterinaries and the house owner are really happy. So what do we have? Well, we have something that we have a preclinical proof on animal testing, that we are 4 times faster healing than our comparator on infected wounds. And why is infection important? Well, for chronic wounds, that is really important because they get infected. How do we do this? We have a native collagen-1 dressing. That is evolution. In your body, collagen-1 is in your skin, intertwined with collagen-6. We've taken 2 collagen-6 peptides, cross-linked them into a native collagen-1 dressing, and therefore we get everything in one go. This dressing is then active for the cells, wound healing. They're active on antibacterial. They protect from bacterial infection. And also, we've shown very clearly that they're non-cytotoxic. They're non-toxic peptides, and the collagen-1 dressing is, of course, completely natural. So, we are here, of course, to raise money. And what we need that for is that we would like to be able to finish our clinical investigation. What we have today is a final product. It can be marketed for the veterinarian market, but we need more proof to get into the human market. And for the first round, we would like to then finish our investigation. We will, of course, partner and launch in the vet market. And as we already have some discussions, we would like to do those to have our peptide technology out-licensed for other diseases, other technologies. In the end, we would maybe need some more money to get access to the US and European market, and as well to partner with the sales organizations. So with the clinical investigation, we do have an ethical approval. We've gone through a lengthened validation at the regulatory deal, and we're now under scrutiny from BfArM in Germany to be able to start the study. Thank you. That one was really stressful.
Thank you so much, Karin. Great presentation. Just time for just a very quick question. You mentioned going for the EU and US markets. Are you aiming for other markets as well?
I mean, the initial ones are there too, of course, because that's kind of where it's the easiest way for us. We're going for EU first, and that depends on that we have a very nice EIC grant in the back. So therefore, that's the first one. But still, the US market, of course, it's the largest market for these kind of products.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have right now, but I'm sure others will ask.
So I'll see you. We're having coffee now, right? So you know.
That is correct. You stole my line. And as Karin just said, we have coffee now. We have a break, and just to be back here at 2:45, and we'll continue.